Let's have AI do our taxes. Let's do the stuff we don't want to do.
Most people study animation for years, but these girls were already working before getting to college. How do you build a career in animation with your sibling as a co-worker? What if you got your first job in animation at 19?
We're two individuals and we're both artists. We just happen to be hired together.
Elena and Olivia Ceballos, better known as Elioli, are the twin duo behind some of the most emotional, atmospheric concept art in modern animation. You might have seen their work in Spellbound, where they designed dreamy scenes with a touch of darkness.
She really wanted us to focus on illustrating particular moments. We would get emotional beats.
They grew up sketching side by side, inspired by the $1 Prince of Egypt art book they couldn't stop flipping through. This passion for art led them to develop their own style. By 14, they were saving up for any art book they could find. By 19, hired by DreamWorks.
Patience is key, and hearing out and then kind of waiting. I would say that's the best way to approach the dynamic.
Since then, they've worked with Disney, Universal, and Skydance. But here's the thing. Even though they're twins, they don't share a desk or take turns on the same drawing. They are two artists, two voices, and one visual language.
We don't view each other as co-workers though, and that's kind of what's interesting.
Now they're building their own short film, The Moon and Me, and it's amazing. It's a dreamy personal project that is now fully in production.
We had a Kickstarter and started working on it, so we actually had to put off about 9 months of time for the short film to do actual work.
How do you go from drawing fan art and collecting art books to defining the visual tone of major animated films? What is really like working as a duo? And what does it take to bring your vision to life? Let's find out. Welcome to Write for Animation, Elena and Olivia. I'm very excited because I discovered your art after hosting a panel with Vicky Jensen, director of Spellbound, on Instagram. I started browsing your page and I was blown away. I really love your style and the emotions that you bring to everything you do. It's so captivating. So congratulations, first of all.
Thank you.
I would like to learn about your artistic journey from a young age. How did you fall in love with art and how did you start your collaboration? You decided to say, well, we should do this together.
Our backstory getting into art, we always displayed an early love for drawing at the toddler age. Around the age of 7, we actually wanted to get into animation. That was largely due to watching Spirit, Stallion and the Cimarron, and a couple years prior, bought very thin Prince of Egypt art book, the dollar store bin. She thought about getting it for us. We looked through that book so many times, and then we watched the behind the scenes making of the Prince of Egypt and all the technical stuff behind it. We were getting into trying to research different artists and animators behind those movies. I think at the time when people say that animation, it's like a general umbrella of the animation field. We didn't know if we were interested in the animating, like moving the characters and stuff, or the artwork or the visual development. So at the time you start drawing with pencil, but I guess we were trying to tackle both, you know, maybe not very successfully, but that was just like, oh, we just want to be a part of this industry because it's like, yeah, you can just make things move or paint backgrounds. And at least at the time we didn't know which parts we were leaning towards. It wasn't until we started getting in our teen years that, okay, you know, I don't think we have the patience for animation, but we liked the visual development or character design aspect. Maybe it was about 12 or 13, we started being more serious about it. We made a lot of bad drawings and interesting, funny artwork during that time. And then maybe it was more like 14 years old, I think, when we really wanted to pursue visual development. But we were still doing character stuff, we wanted to be part of animation. When Kung Fu Panda came out in 2008, we were like 14. That was one of the art books we got. Started collecting them more after that. There's these big coffee table books that range from $50 to $60, so we had to use our own allowance money to buy those books. It was just kind of simple things that we did around the house, but we really saved up and started a collection of all this stuff. And yeah, I think around that age, we really wanted to pursue being in that field. So we wanted to look for a college that catered to animation. At the time, we were living in Georgia in the US. And the closest they had, you know, there's like CalArts, so that was all the way in California. And it was a little bit more expensive, but we wanted to go to SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design, and then they had animation programs. So we visited a couple times before we applied to see how the campus was. We desired to go there when the time was right. We were in high school, around 18 years old. We started around that time making an art blog, like a blog spot, which is defunct. We don't post there anymore. We did it way earlier.
Maybe, yeah,
2011,
we actually made an art blog before
high school, maybe middle school or something. But yeah, we put all our artwork and stuff on there. It wasn't until maybe we were 18. We were still in the process of looking to go to a college, but we had other freelance stuff around that time from Nickelodeon, Disney Toon, and Universal. We kind of started freelancing around without having studio work because we were still at home trying to research for something to go to SCAD. We started working around 18. And then we actually did go to SCAD and stayed there for about 3 weeks until we got hired to go to DreamWorks TV at 19 to work on a new version of VeggieTales as production designer. So that was kind of how we got into animation officially.
Were they doing service for that show, or was it part of DreamWorks?
It was kind of like the DreamWorks TV actually started that TV division. So they had a place in Glendale, and now in Tennessee, that's where VeggieTales was located the later years. I think they were based in Chicago before. It was still connected, but it was a different place where they had it. They had to outsource the animation to Canada, like Bardell Entertainment. We did all our pre-production kind of design work in-house.
It's awesome.
To answer the question about the joint collaboration, it was during when we made our blog spot, we just decided to post. We had a DeviantArt that's not as professional, but we just decided to post under one name. I don't know why. And that's just always kind of been that way. It's easier to keep up with it and manage, I guess. We had similar styles too, so it was like, might as well just be together, I guess.
You mentioned Prince of Egypt. We had Brenda Chapman as a guest on the YouTube channel. It was such an amazing experience to chat about the making of that film years later when she was able to share all the details. It's definitely a masterpiece in animation for sure. Now let's dive a little bit into working on Spellbound, and then we'll transition to The Moon and Me and other projects you've worked on. Something that we want to help storytellers understand is hit row in the pipeline. Until you get to a studio or have a solid formation like film school, it's hard for people to understand the differences between production designer, visual development, character designer. So the question would be, what is visual development for you as an artist, but also on a technical level? What is the practical day-to-day of your work, and how is your relationship with other departments?
That's a very interesting question, and you would think it'd be a lot more simple in terms of just what the name brings. It's a discussion we've had too about what we feel like we bring to the table when we're on certain projects. Just to preface before I answer, I think for us, sometimes we struggle with maybe not feeling like we fit into a particular visual development mold, even though we get hired for things like that. We feel like our stuff is a lot more illustrative. For Spellbound, we were actually called to help out a lot earlier, but we couldn't do it for time management, other projects and stuff. But we were eventually on it about maybe a year and a half later. We were initially as visual development artists. I believe we were credited later as concept artists. For that reason, I think for Vicky, the director, she wanted us to focus more on moments as opposed to what we would consider visual development, more like informing the location in a technical kind of sense. And I believe visual development can range at the early stages, visually developing and throwing out ideas. But throughout the course of the project, when the script is finalized, it tends to be more accurate to what will eventually modeled or used in the film itself. In our particular role on Spellbound, we weren't focusing on set designs and props. She really wanted us to focus on illustrating particular moments. We would get emotional beats of a sad moment or a journey moment or a happy moment. I think because we were late in the process, that's what happened, but I think she maybe thought we were strong at that too. So that was kind of where we were, the task that we were given. In the midst of the technical stuff, a lot of people were doing model packs and breakouts of location design, like what's the color of this tree bark, like a lot of prop callouts and stuff like that. Some of those things don't actually stay in the final because the story changed, but you can see a lot of things like her dealing with her monster parents or early versions of the shadow. It was just a swirly tornado looking thing. It was a lot more dramatic before. They probably changed it for story reasons, but that was the stuff you could see change from how early we were in the process and after. But even in our conceptual work, we were able to hone down the Lake of Light scene. We actually gave the technical thing for that. But it started off as a couple of paintings for that moment of her in the water. It was a free flow emotional piece. Vicky really responded to the way the water looked in a particular image. We did breakouts for that. That actually ended up being in the film. I would say for Spellbound, it was a shift in what she wanted us to do compared to the normal visual development. We really, I guess, did act as conceptual artists, which was an interesting switch up, but it makes more sense at the end
Absolutely.
of the day.
So visual development starts early on to address and explore the entirety of the visual look of the film. And then when you get into concepts, you're trying to capture a moment, the emotion. Would that be an approximation of a distinction between the two roles?
Yeah, I think so. We asked this question on Twitter a couple months ago. We hear the word visual development and then concept art. We're like, aren't they the same thing? Some people say like, well, concept art's more for video games, but viz dev is more for animation. But to me, it's basically the same thing. It's just a different name for the same kind of, art. We have video game and animation, but it's the same concept, just different name.
Okay, great. That's helpful for me. I was confused. I thought I know very little about it. I should know more. But now I know that it's not as clear as other distinctions in the industry. So going back to your beginnings, was there a moment where you decided you have this name, we're going to work together as a team, let's establish some dynamics, a process, or does it just flow and you naturally work well together?
I like to say our mom came up with our moniker. She sews, so she made a little tag that said Elioli. That was her idea. We combined that kind of name and everything. When it comes to being hired for work, a lot of people always think we're taking care of one thing or we take turns on the same computer. We're two individuals and we're both artists. All the places we've been hired to work at, we have been each a singular person just helping out, but we just happened to be hired together. When we started on Veggies, we both took on the same role and did the same stuff. One of us was focusing on this character in this set. The other twin was doing this character in this set for another episode. Other than that, the dynamic is treated like any regular person working. We just happen to be sitting across from each other. Usually every place that we work for has always understood that, and they just get not double the work, but you live in the same house. Sometimes it feels like it's double the work, but we've been very fortunate. I think we have a strength together in terms of feeding off ideas behind the scenes. When the camera turns off, we're sitting at our desk throwing out ideas and feelings that we can present to them, whether in person or over Zoom. But yeah, it's been very interesting. It's great when you want to vent. You can talk about the same things together, all that kind of stuff. We're very fortunate to be together on the journey. But yeah, nothing too different.
You've been doing this for a while. Was there ever a moment where you had very strong differences or any point of crisis that you had to overcome as duo?
I know there are other twins in the industry and they tend to go their own ways. It just so happens that we've been working together and we get along, have the same ideas, the same ways to convey, same thought processes. If it's just butting heads, it's usually something outside of art.
I think about when I work as a writer for directors, it's so good that they're the director. And so at some point, if we disagree, I'm like, you're the director, you have me on board with this, and I'll try to make your version the best I can, even if I disagree, but I'm with you. I wonder if you're on the same level and that you don't need to be twins. How do you solve those situations? I guess that conversation and trying to get to an agreement is probably the way to go.
Well, it's better to be that way. The only times we have disagreements is maybe how we're doing something, but that's kind of a trivial thing. When it comes to the vision, we're 100% always the same
Any advice you would give? We don't need a drama to share some tips because it sounds like you're managing this. We have Mission Academy, which is our membership where we write together and share our work. We have a duo of sisters, and Peyton and Mina, they were very young when they started their production company. This question comes to mind. Do you have any advice to give to other siblings working together?
Professional or personal level?
No, I would say professional.
It's okay to, if you need space in something real quick, or if you have a disagreement on your professional work, just talk about it. I know we're going to disagree. You just have to be patient sometimes for the end result. If you're working together, you're not always going to be on the same pace, especially being twins and not just siblings. Understanding, even as individuals, you have your own pace. Working with that definitely helps. Also, just to talk about stuff that you agree or disagree with, even if you don't like hearing it. It's not always like a personal criticism, but sometimes if you feel like you're on a roll with something, step back and hear each other's thoughts. And I think that's definitely the best way forward. We can get a bit stubborn with the way we want to do something. I don't want to frame it as strengths or weaknesses. I don't want to look at anything. I think we have stronger opinions or ways of doing things that are more prone to me and more prone to her. That's kind of always been the same thing throughout our entire life. When that comes together, you have a little headbutting, like, wait, I think we should look at it this way, or maybe we should not do that. One of us would be more, And yeah, the patience thing is more like 90% of the time that tends to be the right course of action. But then once in a while, the other is like, oh man, you're right. Sometimes you got to just see if we're going to be wrong, you're going to be wrong. The sibling aspect, that to me, I think that's one of the... It's almost like don't take things too personally. Yeah. Think of it as like your other coworker you're on the same level with, but it's like you're not trying to take anything But we don't view each other as coworkers, though. And that's kind of what's interesting, that we have different outlooks. Or I didn't think of it that way until... Because we never say it out loud, like, we're not really coworkers. Like, well, like, kind of, but not... You wouldn't tell that to your coworker. So anyway, it can get interesting. Patience is key, and hearing out and then kind of waiting. I would say that's the best way to approach the dynamic. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't have a twin brother, but I've been working with my brother. They're in Italy and I'm living in Mexico, so the distance helps a lot. I met a twin duo of character designers, and they seem to have a similar dynamic. They're called the Awesome Brosos. Oh, yeah. They're amazing. I also met them through their art and I got to chat and spend some time with them. And it's a super interesting dynamic because the style is so unique. And I think there's something special about it, working with your brothers or sisters. But it's great. And I think it's great advice, the patience, talking about the differences. Hey, I just want to stop quickly to invite you to join our Write for Animation Academy. It's a creative community where animation storytellers come together to share feedback, swap ideas, and push each other to the next level. We host daily writing sessions to help you stay consistent, weekly feedback sessions to improve your work, and monthly masterclass with great names from the industry, whether you're starting out or already pitching your own show. When you join, you get instant access to our short film writing course. This is a step-by-step program that will guide you through writing your own short film script in just 4 weeks. Join us today at writeforanimation.com/academy. The link is down below, and I cannot wait to meet you in our next session. Now, let's get back to Elioli. Now, I would like, before we get to your amazing personal projects, to explore if there's any particular design or concept that you are very fond of in Spellbound. Can you guide us through a breakdown of what's going on visually and what was your process for it? There's going to be more to understand what is the artistic process and your specific approach when you're assigned a task. In this case, you were interacting directly with Vicky Jensen, the director of the film. Is there any particular piece that comes to mind? Because these concepts were opposite each other, I thought they were interesting. There's that lake of light in the movie, that ethereal, shiny water she can touch, but it's like mist. I did mention about the darkness. There's actually maybe not one particular piece, but a section of a group of concepts relating to that idea. It's interesting because it's like you're working from the ground up. There was a bit of darkness that represents what the family was going through. It's interesting to take that emotional aspect and put it in a physical form. The Lake of Light was quite the opposite of that, where it actually heals, mending their relationship, at least coming to an understanding anyway. It's actually like a physical embodiment of trying to heal their physical form or outward appearance from their emotional turmoil. I remember Vicky talking about the shadow, and there's several ideas. It's just like a veil of a shadow, but during that process, for us specifically, make it interesting. We usually like dabbling in our personal work with a lot of abstract pieces, so we thought a great opportunity to build off that. But you don't want to say, oh, how do we make it interesting? But how does it feel emotionally connected with that idea? I think we played out with it just being a little bit more in the movie. It's seen, but not as prominent. And I think, like I said, they changed it for the story for not being a big meteorological phenomenon, because that wasn't the main point they wanted to get across. In the early versions, we designed it kind of not mysterious, but like a little distant, eerie, because it's not supposed to be a horror movie, but something that slowly over time envelops the family. And so what we wanted to come across, like, how does it start encroaching on their territory without being a giant whirlwind? So a lot of it had concepts where it was just overtaking things quietly. Like a lot of color gets sucked up into the atmosphere almost. It's just literally taking the concept of light and taking it outside of the physical realm. We had a lot of rainbows and stuff being like on the surface. It's like, oh, this is kind of where the family was at one point emotionally, but then it's teetering on the edge. Like it's just going to be covered up by darkness. And of course we were thinking like, oh, it'd be cool, like, yeah, with reflecting or pushing away light. I'm not saying it's scientifically accurate, but to add that, but then it's kind of like, yeah, it shows what that is related to emotionally for their journey of everything almost being about to be closed off and all that color being just kind of wiped away. So I think we had some of those little rainbow elements in there to indicate their emotional journey. In general, we'd like playing with abstract details like that, but it felt like the shadow was close but distant and something a little sad about it. I think that was one of our favorite pieces to conceptualize.
Nice. I think it's beautiful. I was looking at the art, but also the blend between seeing the transition from the concept into the final rendering with all the possibility that CG brings to materials, like reflections and things like that. What is something that is very personal to you that made you connect with the film? Like an emotional aspect that maybe became personal to you approaching and learning about the story and working on the project?
If you live a realistic life, I think you could see sometimes hard times in the family. There might be some years where something was happening, and you can kind of channel, even if it's not family related, something that you were used to as a foundation, or you saw people as an example, not a pedestal, but you see people and you put them in this position of they can never do wrong and all that kind of stuff. And then I think anyone's world be shaken up by something such as the parents in the movie. I think anyone can relate to feeling forgotten or not loved, or something to that effect, where you really question the reality or what you knew. You grow up and learn more things, or are more aware of the unshakableness, of something. And I think that's kind of a universal type of feeling for a lot of people. I'm not sure if it transfers so much into our art, but a lot of the art that we made for her traveling with her parents is like a road trip, and you want them to get along and all that kind of stuff, and to have her interact with the parents. They're in their little monster state, and to take them out of that felt like she was trying her best with what she could do, and to make a relatively quaint journey, and some of the moments feel emotional is what we try to tap into in those particular moments.
Is there any tidbit or background element that the regular audience member is not aware of, but has a visual progression or something that has a peculiar approach that you like to share?
This is the first time that we've seen Skydance do what they can do. All the people working probably added a whole lot that I wasn't aware of. I think for some of the movements for little character, little blink, or the what species they are, or whatever they're called,
This guy?
Yeah. Yeah. Those were really cute. And I think there's some interesting creatures that we probably haven't seen too much of animation, like the different characters. I thought those were interesting. I wish you'd see more of that stuff animated. A lot of the early concepts had more forest creatures too, but for time's sake, they probably couldn't add them all. It would have been really interesting to see the magical element in the movie when they would bring to life the banners that were hanging from the castle. There's this big hand with the water, They just put a lot of thought into the world building. So I think a lot of those little quirky things that you have to watch really close because there's a lot of thought behind it.
Especially how the animation is based in Madrid, Spain. They added a lot of Spanish, Moorish elements to the production design, and I thought that's kind of a nice touch, specifically for like a children's animated fantasy. You don't really see stuff like that, but it's a nod to their studio, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, that's something I noticed as well. And we have friends at the studio, both in the US and Spain. What would you say makes Guidance special? Is there anything that stood out compared to previous experiences? Something that they care for, something you noticed while working with them?
I think because it is like a newer studio, they only have a few movies under their belt. I think anything is possible. The fact that they would make something like Spellbound means the door's open to not be as more house than like Pixar or something like that. There's an opportunity to kind of make anything there. So far, the roster is pretty diverse in what kind of movies they want to make. I think the experience we have is good. You don't want to make it different in a bad way. You want it to be something you're familiar with when you go to work. So that familiarity and the process of making stuff should feel like you're at home. You want the difference in the output of the projects, but you want to have the familiarity working on them, if that makes sense. So you can have a different thing here, but the same here.
Now it's all about sharing your personal projects and seeing how I started reading the comic online. It's just amazing. I want to recommend you to any studio and involve you in any project I'm part of, because I really love your art style and the emotion in the characters, how you play with light, shapes. Those elements are fantastic. I'm a writer, so I cannot put words that it's connected to the technical aspect, but I can definitely feel the emotion. I want to learn about this project and how you started as a comic, but also the idea of putting it out there online, and now that you're working on the short film.
Yeah, so it started, the way it always starts for us, a lot of things started as experiments, you know. It's kind of a loose term, but we just maybe draw a random illustration one day, because we have a lot of, you know, call ourselves out, but a lot of our pictures have girls in white dresses. She's not original to us in that way. We put her in a ethereal, starry moon environment, just in these random illustrations. They didn't have a story to them. We were telling a show, as silly as it sounds, we've never really dabbled in comics or in the traditional way of how all the panels are vertical. We have a hard time making stuff look like that for a reason. So we had it, you know, I had this series of illustrations where it was like this horizontal form with a black border, and then I added text at the bottom. I know it sounds a little pretentious, like, oh, you want to make it look cinematic, but I was like, yeah, it kind of did. Looks like a still frame. I was like, oh, how nice. And then I just wrote these random words. It was actually maybe the first 4 panels of the comic or something, when she's traveling with the moon. That's just what it was. And it just started off randomly. There was no story connected it to or anything. But then over the next couple of weeks, I was like, you know, I kind of want to add on to this. This is interesting. We've never really done comics before, but we felt like this is the best way that we can do it. We know how to do it because we approach it very illustrative. That continued to happen, and then, well, where do we post this stuff? We posted on our Facebook or Instagram. Then we heard of the site called Webtoon. A lot of their stuff's geared towards a specific kind of stories. The comic's a mix of like Disney and anime and something else in between, Eastern European or whatever the inspiration hits of the style. But we're like, I don't know if we should put it on there because it doesn't really match the vibes. If you're familiar with a certain kind of stories on there, there's definitely a popular type of storytelling that's plot line that happens, but you know, it's fine when you want to enjoy that stuff too. So yeah, we just posted it on there. It got featured a few times, like on a weekly thing. There was talks about it being turned into an actual webtoon, because Webtoon Canvas is a place where you can put your ideas, but it doesn't get on full-blown webtoon. And it's still on Canvas, but it was talked about going a little bit bigger. But then there's some ins and outs we didn't really like about that, because then you have to produce it on a really more consistent basis, and probably a lot of rights and stuff that you have to figure out. Or they didn't want it after we mentioned that stuff to them. So I was like, maybe that's a blessing in disguise anyway, because now we can just work on it on time. But it just kind of started off as an experimental thing and turned into something that felt meaningful to us as a story, which we can delve into that more.
The concept of sequential art is not something, I think as artists, it depends what you want to do, but we felt like if you're in a box, you're only supposed to be making this kind of art. We were known for just making illustrations. And I think the sequential storytelling side of things was a challenge for us. Not that we mastered it, but it was something new to try. And I think during that time, a little bit after COVID, we saw some short films. I'm like, Well, if we're doing a comic, maybe the next point is to try a short film. We never did Film Limited, but the reception of what people think when we start branching out, like doing this kind of stuff. We've never done this before. We thought The Moon and Me was a good basis to make a more condensed or simplified version of the overall story in a short film version. I think that's how that got birthed. That's what we're doing right now.
Where are you in the development and production of the short? I've seen some previews. It looks amazing. What stage are you in?
We had a Kickstarter and started working on it, initial crew and everything. Then we ended up getting some studio work on top of getting another side thing for making a music video. So we actually had to put off about 9 months of time for the short film to do actual work. And then after we arrived out of that 9-month break, we viewed our animatic, which originally had other storyboarders work on it. This part we feel kind of bad about, but yeah, we wrote the story, so it had nothing to do with the storyboarders. We looked at the animatic and we're like, I think this could be stronger. I think we can make this a better story. We learned a lot from the music video and actually the process of implementing Toon Boom harmony and actually learning a lot more of the process for ourselves and how much we're able to do on our own. We've gotten to doing animatics or storyboards, and it's like we can do a lot of the BGs, obviously. We're doing the character turnarounds. Everything aside animation, we can actually do ourselves. But I think we need to make stories stronger. We had to let some of the crew know, like, hey, there's nothing to do with you guys. We're going to take on the rest of it and redo the whole story. It took us about 1.5 months to come to a conclusion and have a new animatic ready. Right now, we're at the beginning stages of rough animation. We have someone rigging the main character. We're going to have a few people starting previs on some 3D locations. We're getting the ball rolling again. Took a break and another project to kind of come back stronger. We view that as a good thing that happened.
Yeah, I said for 9 months, but it's like better to wait and kind of,
we're going to be much happier.
Well, that's what I see a lot, and that sometimes you need that detachment, but also you need a little more time for the story. It really can change everything for the project because it costs the same to do something that is quite not there and something that's fantastic. Actually, most of the time, a good story tends to remove stuff, so it makes it actually cheap. We've got an interview with Denver Jackson. He created a film by himself and his crew for Flow was 30 people. So I love this new space where the internet becomes a way of controlling more of the distribution. I think it could lead to very interesting stuff in the future as well. As you saw on Instagram, we have a couple of questions. I want to make sure we attend those. One says, do you usually land jobs for the same IP with one doing character art and the other environments, or work on separate projects?
We get hired on the same thing and we're usually tasked to do environments. We never really get asked to do character stuff. Even though we draw characters on our free time, we primarily do a lot of environment, concept art, and mood stuff. So we usually do the same thing.
We touched up on this one, but maybe a short answer to address the specific question. How have you marketed yourself as Elioli so successfully? What are the advantages and disadvantages of working as a duo?
The marketing side of things was kind of an accident. It just kind of happened. We didn't sign up a new email to make another blog spot, so we ended up just joining. We pretty much share every social media. The advantages and disadvantages, we've kind of wondered about that too. I wouldn't say being a duo is an advantage. I think people just enjoy the artwork that we do and we happen to be a duo. I'd like to think of it that way. I don't think the duo thing's an appeal to studios at all. We just like whatever you guys do.
Especially if they have to pay 2 people. Unless you're an LLC, which we were at one point, but now we've dissolved it, so we moved to a different state.
We've talked about if we've ever been denied studio work because there were 2 of us, we would never know. We've always wondered if they didn't know how to approach that. You don't know about the jobs you didn't get, right? So I'm not really sure. I would say there's not really advantages or disadvantages because I think the art speaks for itself. The advantage is for the studio, right? You get 2 people. So it's more of an advantage for them than it is for us. Other than that, we get 2 paychecks. That's pretty nice.
I think you said it right, because that was my experience, like seeing this stunning, beautiful, emotional art. And then I realized that it became an interesting fact to get to know you as a duo, but you get the result, and the result is fantastic. I always think about this idea of animation as collaboration, and the fact that you're constantly working together. One thing, I don't want to end on a sour note, but that's something on top of mind for so many people. What is your worst fear connected to artificial intelligence? What is your take on the whole situation?
I think AI, there's different aspects, but one thing that is hooked up on has been art. I think that's one of the capabilities, and people easily jump to something that they feel like they have control over. And I think it's more of I want to feel like I'm in control or doing something meaningful at the end of the day. I don't want to psychoanalyze people. I do think there's an issue with people not putting in hard work outside of that in their life, and I think this is an easy way to achieve that. It might be like cooks one day, it can move on to the next thing, some weird window of opportunity. I think right now artists happen to be the thing because AI is tapping into that category. If it was something else, they'd move on and have that outlook too, but I think it's a reflection of things going on in someone's life. This is the way they're taking it out. Let's have AI do our taxes. Let's go do the stuff we don't want to do. I think it's a search for meaning for them, and this is a supposedly achievable way of doing it, and I still don't think people are going to be satisfied.
That's super interesting. Again, I didn't want to end on the set elements.
Yeah, but that's the root of it.
Why else would they just be so angry?
You can't just be that angry.
Unless you have...
Yeah, you mean the AI artists?
It's an outlet right now.
Yeah, and the internet always puts things on an extreme. I had this discussion months ago with Tom Moore from Cartoon Saloon, and he said, I'm worried about AI in general, not only what it can do to the studio and us. It's very interesting. Maybe it pushes things so far that people will have to embrace doing art for the joy of creating art because of the commoditization of being able to do tedious or repeating stuff. Thank you so much, Elena and Olivia. This has been fantastic. I always wanted to get to know you as soon as I discovered your art. What is next for you? Is there anything that you can talk about besides the short film and the recent music video?
I don't know if I would say it's an official thing. We have another possible project we want to tackle after the short film. Like I said, it's not an official thing, but we're starting to maybe tinker with tackling the Genesis, maybe something like that, the book of the Bible.
That's something on your website, right?
Yeah,
I saw some art.
Usual kind of starts a little randomly, but this an animation, like we haven't actually, you see the Prince of Egypt and other films, but this would be kind of cool to tackle.
And I think if we can get the short film, we'll hopefully show people that we're serious about finishing something and complete a project and a team, and maybe that will be our next step for something.
Yeah, definitely one thing at a time.
Yeah. So we'll put a link to your website and social media. Art is amazing, and people can get to know more of your work. We cannot wait for the short film. Thank you so much for this conversation. It's been amazing. Elioli's art is incredible. Please go watch it, and I left the links down below. And if you want to keep learning about art in animation, watch this video where artist Almu Redondo shares how her artistic journey led her all the way to Cartoon Saloon. I am Pietro, this is Write for Animation, and I'll see you there.